Cinema Judge!
Hello, and welcome to the Cinema Judge. To all my regulars out there, welcome back. And if you're new to the show, welcome aboard. And if you happen to like it, feel free to 5-star it, share it, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I'd really appreciate it. And if you are a first-time listener, let me just give you what this show is about in a nutshell. I love movies, and I like to talk movies and share movies. That's what we do here. I'm not here to rip into Hollywood, rip into actors. I just love movies, and I want to talk movies. And you won't hear me telling you don't see a movie, because that's ridiculous to me. We've all had different paths to get here. Who am I to tell you what to like? I'll give you the evidence. That's my job. I give you the evidence, you make up your own mind. We're all smart people. We don't need somebody telling us. I mean, I'll tell you if I like it, like I like this movie, because like I always say, any movie is somebody's favorite movie. In Approaching the Bench today, we have the epic movie, The Northman, and it's directed by Robert Eggers. This guy is phenomenal. He's only done 3 movies. This is his 3rd movie. He did The Witch, The Lighthouse, which is incredible. If you ever have a chance to see The Lighthouse, amazing film. There is so much going on in that movie. And now, The Northman. And here's the tagline for this movie. We follow a young Viking prince on his quest to avenge his father's murder. You're going to hear this later in the show, which is really fascinating. Shakespeare got the idea for Hamlet from a story from this area of the Vikings. They'll say the person's name, but I'm like, wow, I never knew that. And the main character in here, if you rearrange the letters of his name, you could spell Hamlet. It's just very fascinating. Well, you're in for a treat on this episode. I really enjoyed this film. Now here's a trailer for The Northman.
Now, behold.
He's here. He's here.
Mother! Father is here!
The king, my lady. The king.
Your fate is set and you cannot escape it. How I've missed you, my son. One day this kingdom will be yours.
Thank you, father. My king.
Feel now. I will avenge you, father! I will save you, mother! I will kill you, Fiona!
I will avenge you, father. I will save you, mother. I will kill you, Fiona.
Why would he stow away to such a hellish place?
To find what was stolen from me.
And what is that?
The kingdom.
You must choose between kindness for your kin or hate for your enemies.
Your strength breaks men's bones. I have the cunning to break their minds.
And night by night, we will carry out my pledge of vengeance.
I will avenge you, father.
I will avenge you, father.
I will save you, mother.
I will save you, mother.
I will kill you, Fiona.
Now, approaching the bench first, we're going to hear from Alexander Skarsgard. This guy is incredible. His whole family, the whole family is just acting legends. But you've seen him in Big Little Lies, True Blood, The Little Drummer Girl, Succession, and The Legend of Tarzan, just to name a few. But in this interview, he talks about how it was originally his concept, his idea to make a Viking story.
For a couple of years, I was just kind of, the idea was kind of bouncing around in my head of would it be possible to kind of initiate this journey of putting together a big epic Viking movie with an old Icelandic saga at the core. I didn't know which one. There's so many of them, and I didn't really have a starting point. I didn't know where to how to kind of attack it, but I kind of knew that I wanted the combination of the old sagas are often about a family feud. It's about revenge. They're quite contained. And I thought it'd be incredible if you can combine that, but to do that on an epic scale. So you'd both have big battle scenes, but also at the core of it is this quite intimate story.
We're going to hear next from the director, Robert Eggers, and he talks about what kind of story he wanted to make, and he references what I was telling you earlier about Hamlet in Shakespeare. This is really kind of cool. Check it out.
I immediately knew that it should be a revenge story, partially because that's just most of these Viking stories are revenge stories, but you know, a good revenge movie works. And I felt that if I could find a really simple, mythic, clear tale that this audience could relate to and understand, then I could indulge in the material world and the inner and religious and mythological world more than if the story was complex. And so really quickly, I discovered the story of Amleth that was written by the Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus. And Amleth was the source material for Shakespeare's Hamlet, also known as The Lion King. And so when I had this story, you know, uncle kills dad, steals mom, son goes on revenge. Everybody knows this. You know, this just works. So that was really exciting.
And this movie does work. It is. It's simple but complex all at the same time. You could take whatever you want out of it, but basically, it's a revenge story, but it's told in a very unique way. Up next, we're going to hear from Alexander Skarsgard, and he's going to talk about finally deciding on or realizing why Robert Eggers was perfect to direct this movie.
We wanted to look as real and truthful as possible. And when it turned out that he was incredibly passionate about Norse mythology and the Viking culture, it felt like the obvious choice or a dream choice for us. So after that meeting, I spoke to Lars, and we both agreed that Rob would be the perfect director for this project. So we asked him, and to our great delight, he said that he wanted to jump on board. And so that was kind of the genesis of this collaboration between the three of us.
The director's up next, and he's going to talk about how at first everybody thinks the Vikings were these big, dumb, not very smart people, but there's a lot of mythology, and this movie has a lot of that in here. It's so rich with mythology and folklore, whatever word you want to use, and he talks about that a little bit here.
My biggest misconception about Vikings was just that they were, you know, big, stupid, raping, pillaging, you know, and look, the Vikings did a lot of terrible stuff, like they're, you know, and I don't shy away from that in the film. But what got me fascinated was the rich mythology and poetry. As I learned more, even, you know, their wood carvings and visual artistic expression was also very inspiring. But I think when you're dealing with these pagans, they're the pagan in the period in our film, who every part of life is an expression of belief, and belief is an expression of every part of life. There is so much beauty in the way that they saw the world.
And he doesn't shy away from the violence. He does. He dives in and he really gives it to you. But it's tactfully done, or should I say tastefully done? Whatever word I'm looking for. He has it, but he shoots it just wonderfully. But up next, we're going to hear from Alexander Skarsgard talking about how this movie really is character driven, and it really is. It could have simply just been, like I said, a straight up revenge movie, which it is, but there's so much more to these characters.
It's character driven. That was important. That it wasn't. You want it to be visually overwhelming and a lot and spectacular, but you need to care about these characters and follow them and feel for them and have these intimate moments between them, which made it a lot of. It was a great movie to shoot because you got, in a way, the best of both worlds. You got these incredible set pieces, big fight scenes, but you also got days where you're in a room with Nicole Kidman and just it's a dead quiet scene, two characters talking to each other for 4, 5, 6 pages, and it's a real treat when you can have both in the same movie.
And in this next interview, you're going to hear from the director, and he really sums this up perfectly. How he wasn't going out to glamorize their actions or anything like that. I really like how he explains it here.
I try to present this mindset, the Viking mind, whatever that is, without judgment. This is their beliefs. It's not my beliefs. It's not your beliefs. This is their beliefs. But even then, in not trying to romanticize their beliefs, I think with the revenge motif, as an audience member, part of you just wants him to get revenge because that's the way these kinds of stories work. But you do ask questions, hopefully, if I've done my job, who's right and who's wrong. And that's one of the cool things about the sagas is they also, as far as the protagonists and the antagonists, there is often gray area there. They are full characters, and so I hope that even in telling this story about a culture who says you must revenge, and you're going to be shamed and criticized, and everyone's going to hate you, and you're a failure if you don't revenge, that we can still wonder if that's the right thing to do.
I really felt he explained it really well right there. Now, up next, we're going to hear from Alexander Skarsgard, and he's going to talk about how ever since he's been a young kid, he's been fascinated with the Viking story. And he also talks about his acting career in this interview. Talks about all his different characters, and he's never really played a Scandinavian guy.
Obviously, from when I was very young, I had this fixation and a pull towards Viking culture and Norse mythology. And then I've basically lived half my life in the States, half my life in Sweden, grew up in Sweden, then half my life in the States. And in those 20 years since I left Sweden, I've played a lot of really interesting characters. I've been very fortunate, but I don't think I've ever played a Scandinavian. I guess I did a show called True Blood, and on that one, my character had been in the States for 2 centuries, but was originally a Viking, also named Northman, by the way, in his last name. But I never. There was something about being away from Sweden that long, playing characters from around the world, mostly American characters, that kind of awakened that desire to go back to my roots in a way, and to play a Viking was something that I was desperate to do.
I just find that very interesting. All these characters, and I just want to do this. And then now he can. Now up next, we're going to hear from the director, and he's going to talk about how it was to work with somebody else, and somebody who's so talented and skilled and knowledgeable as a co-writer.
I was incredibly fortunate that Shion, the Icelandic novelist and poet, wanted to work with me. I mean, I don't use this word lightly. He's a genius, not to say that this thing we created together is genius, but he is one. And his understanding of this mythology and culture is just very rich to begin with, even though we did a lot of research. But it was one of the most fun collaborations I've ever had in my life. He has a wonderful sense of humor, and he's also just so incredibly fast. If I have one small idea, he'll then send like 10 ideas like based on that immediately. But basically, I wrote a treatment. I went to Iceland. We enriched that together. He wrote a longer treatment, which I gave him notes on. He wrote a longer one. I gave him notes on that. Then he wrote a draft. I gave him notes. And then he wrote another draft, and then I revised that. And then we revised together.
And the dialogue in this movie is really incredible. It's not your typical structure and delivery sometimes, but it's great. Now, up next, we're going to hear from Skarsgard talking about the origins of this story and how it's evolved throughout the years.
So our story is based on Prince Amlet of Jutland by Saxo Grammaticus in the 12th century. So about 200 years after the end of the Viking era, the Viking Age, which was the predecessor of Hamlet. It's Shakespeare based Hamlet on this character. Hence, he's a Danish prince, and the structure is basically young man, father murdered by uncle, marries his mother. That is in the Northman. Everything else is quite different. Hamlet is very much a man of inaction. Amleth is definitely not. He is very much a man of action. At least once he's set on the right path, when he found he realized what his fate was, and when Bjork's character reminds him of who he is and what his purpose is, his mission.
Coming up next, we're going to hear from Claes Bang. He plays the bad uncle, the one who kills the father of the main character and then takes the wife. And then from that point on, the revenge story, begins. So here he is talking about what attracted him to the project and a little bit more about his character. About I was so sick of my brother. I just had to take off his head.
Over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've probably done a lot of movies that are sort of really found it in that very existentialistic, psychological thing that is that is quite common for a lot of movies, right? But this had that feel of something different in that sense. And then, yeah, I think that's sort of what attracted, because it was not so much, the character itself, or it was more the thing that it was a chance to do something completely different. And work in a completely different way with not nearly as many lines as I've been used to. It's much more a physical thing. So yeah, that probably was the thing that I thought, okay, that's where this is going to be something else. Well, King Arundel is my brother, half brother. I'm sick of him. The first words that come out of my mouth when I sort of look up to his castle where he's sitting is proud ringed Peacock. I think he's making too much of a fuss about everything. He should be, so I'm sick of him to a degree where I've decided to chop his head off. So, I probably couldn't be more sick of him.
Siblings. I think we all can relate to that little moment there. Now, coming up next, we're going to hear from Ethan Hawke. Now, let's look at his career. What an amazing career. From Training Day, Before Sunrise, Before Midnight, Boyhood, and then even the recent Disney Plus show, Moon Knight. He really knows how to do what he does. Now, in this next interview, he talks about the language of this film. And it really, truly does have this rich language and very poetic. And he also, really talks about the beauty of this film. It has combined so many elements. Here he is.
The thing that's really striking about it from the get-go is the language. Most films don't aspire to a sense of originality in their language. You know, it's something in the theater you see a lot, no matter virtually any playwright worth their salt has kind of their own use of language and playfulness of character and world building. But for convenience and for audiences and for mass appeal, in general, cinema has a very, what they call naturalistic hit on language, which is just try to make it as easy as possible to be digested by as many different people as possible. And what you lose then is a sense of specificity or character or originality. And so there's a poetry to the language of this. It almost feels like Beowulf or something. I remember that's what I thought when I read this. Oh, this aspires to be a kind of grand poem about a Viking king. You know, it was really beautiful. The story is, pretty simple. The kind of classic son losing a father and trying to make sense of the universe and finding his place in the context of the world without a father, without a role model, without a mentor. And that's a kind of very old story. It's even older than Hamlet. And so my character in a lot of ways is a symbol of fatherhood and a symbol of something lost. I had a sense that I would like for him to be kind of the way the younger generation often sees the older generation as having more integrity and having faced a harder world, and admiring them for that. But I don't know, it's difficult to, one of the beautiful things about this movie is a sense of mystery. You know, that's what poetry can achieve that most television or magazine articles or, they sometimes say too much, and in saying too much, you limit things. And what's beautiful about this is just the mystery of it. I find him incredibly interesting character.
We're going to hear next from Claes Bang, and he's going to talk about the two differences between Shakespeare and this version. That Shakespeare internalized. This one's more external.
The Hamlet story of the ancient Danish story that is like what this thing took inspiration for. I mean, I think what Robert has done with this, he's put it more in the category of a revenge story than Shakespeare's is, for instance. Shakespeare, he tries to sort of, in that one, it goes on inside Hamlet, doesn't it? It's like he's trying to come to terms with the fact that his uncle has killed his father and is now with his mother. And he's solving it as a modern person, think he should, inside, within himself. And here, the revenge is lived. It's put into action. So that in that sense, it's a very different direction to the. I mean, I think in Shakespeare's play, he wants to call him. He puts on this play that's supposed to reveal, all that. But here, no questions are asked. It's like your old Western movie where you shoot first and ask the questions after. So in that sense, revenge is at the core of this story, of this version of the Hamlet myth.
I don't know about you, but I just love how these two different stories are just so parallel to each other, but one is really popular and the other one is just kind of like there. I just find that very interesting. Now, coming up next, we're going to hear from Ethan Hawke. He talks about how great directors lead by example. And Robert Eggers is no different.
All the best directors I've ever worked with lead by example, meaning that they're so immersed in the world that it's contagious. Robert gave me a ton of books and literature and videos to watch about Vikings and played Viking music. And I have a small part in this movie. But his passion for every detail makes you realize that somebody cares. Somebody cares whether it's done right or done wrong. A lot of times you get a sense that people don't care, people aren't going to notice. And, that's the thing about Kazan, they used to say about a lot of Kazan, he just noticed everything. He noticed everything, and that's why the work is so good, is it's each detail in and of itself doesn't matter, but 1,000 details has a gravitational pull towards excellence. And Robert has that.
Now we're going to have a scene for you next. In this scene, we have Ethan Hawke. He's on his knees. He has some arrows in him. And then up walks his brother. And then they occasionally cut back to the son, who's like watching from afar. And then you hear Ethan Hawke, the king, give a speech to his brother.
You behold your brother's gaze in amazement. I knew well you would. Pity you never paid a bastard's eyes heed before. Now, behold how swiftly your brother swings his sword. Strike, brother, strike. But know that bearing a stolen ring makes no half-breed a king. Soaked in my blood, 'twill soon be sliding off your arm like a serpent. Your kingdom will not last. Let this misdeed haunt your living nights, till a flaming vengeance scorches on your dead. Strike. Strike!
It's such a great scene. It really is. But up next, the director talks about Anya Taylor Joy. Now, you might know her from The Queen's Gambit, Robert Eggers' first film, The Witch, Peaky Blinders, Lock and Key, Last Night in Soho, which is a great film. If you've never seen Last Night in Soho, give it a shot. She is so talented. But this is him talking about the character.
Anya Taylor Joy plays Olga of the Birch Forest, who is a Slavic woman and a white witch who is enslaved by the Viking mercenaries that Amleth, for a time, is employed by. And he sneaks aboard the slave ship that's bringing Olga and some other enslaved Slavic people to Iceland. And I think, he's intrigued by her powers, and she must wonder, what in the hell is this Viking doing on here, on this slave boat? Like, there's something going on. And I think that then they realize that they can help each other get off this island, and that's which is what she wants. But Alex has some things he needs to get done first, of course.
We're going to hear next from Anya Taylor Joy, and she just talks about pretty much no-brainer to do this film.
I got sent the script a little while ago, and I was already in because it was Robert. And when he told me that he'd written the character with me in mind, I was just so overwhelmed and humbled and just wanted to go on another adventure with him. And what an adventure it is.
Now, I love this next interview with the director. He was talking about Anya here, and just about how professional she is, how she raises the bar. Many actors would ask for doubles or all this other stuff for people in the background. No, not her. She wants to be the character. Whether she's in the shot or not, she is actually that person in the background. That is so rare. but the commitment she has, I salute her. And this is him saluting her.
Anya, aside from being, a perfectionist in her work and an incredible actress who's able to express really deep subtext with a simple line, she's also super professional. And she a lot of times was almost a background character in some of these scenes, like where, and a lot of actresses might have asked to use a double, but she was there with her shoes off in the mud in the freezing cold, and being again a leader for everyone to respect and say, like, this is how you conduct yourself on a set.
It's just so cool to hear a director really appreciate somebody who's that committed. Up next, we're going to hear a little bit more from Anya Taylor Joy, talking about her character, and she talks about the long takes. And if you really pay attention when you go to see this film, they have oneers, meaning very long takes. In these long takes, it really makes her as a performer really just commit to the scene. You're not stopping every 2 seconds for coverage or this or that. You are in the scene. It's just a really cool interview.
Olga was very interesting to me because I knew that I would be portraying an archetype, and the idea of how to be an archetype while still keeping it real and fresh and not going into stereotype. I think I was intrigued with how I could kind of play in that boundary. When we meet Olga, Olga is just hanging out in her village. She's having a good time, living a good life. She is a Slavic lady. But you don't get to see a lot of that. I think we're very quickly on the adventure, but something that I really love about her is her connection to the spiritual world and to nature. She really feels a sense of safety in her belief in fate. And that's a lovely confidence, actually, to have as a character, because you know that whatever's going on for her, she knows that it's what is meant to be, and that gives her a sense of ease, even when things are very difficult. One of the things that excites me most about this film is the long takes that we're getting to do, because that as a performer is so wonderful. You're not getting stopped every 2 seconds. You get to actually be in the scene, be in the moment, and let it play all the way out.
We're going to hear next from Alexander Skarsgard, and he's going to talk about the joy of working with Anya Taylor Joy.
Anya's incredible to work with, really. It was important we don't have that many scenes, at least in the first half of the movie. So it was really important to kind of pack a punch in those scenes and to really feel that connection. I think it helps that we had a lot of fun together, and we did enjoy spending time together, or I hope, at least I did. I hope Anya felt the same way. Again, we talked a lot about it because there are so few scenes in the beginning and the setup of this relationship. It was very important that for the audience to feel, oh, this is a strong connection, and he can't do this without her.
We're going to hear next from Anya Taylor Joy, and she's going to talk about how she enjoyed working with Alexander Skarsgard. But then right after that, we're going to play a scene for you. In this clip, here she walks up to him. It's muddy out there, and he's just sitting there, next to a little hut, eating something. And she's like, "Did you find what you were looking for last night?" Because he had to go, look for something. And he's like, "Oh man, it's a nightmare." But then, she just pretty much grabs him, doesn't grab him physically, but just emotionally in the scene of, well, then you got to step up. Here it is.
Alex is so incredible to watch because he's a fantastic leader, like a truly fantastic leader. No matter how many times you make him wrestle the strongest man in the world, he's just still smiling and still has this energy about him. It's very inspiring to see.
Did you find it? What you lost?
In the house today, was it there?
That. And more. It's a nightmare.
Then you must wake up.
We're going to hear next from the director, and these are really two cool interviews. One is why he wanted to make this film, because of the great landscape, and also about he doesn't do anything halfway. He just, if he's passionate about it, he wants to make something, a movie about it. This is just two cool interviews.
The thing that made me want to make a Viking movie was the Icelandic landscapes, the awe of these landscapes that feel before time and without time, because they're just so epic. And you felt like, when I felt like, silly as it is, like when I didn't even know anything about them, like the Norse gods have got to be here, man. Like they've got to be here. And so when you are telling a mythic tale like this, like you want to have these mythic landscapes to set it in. I don't do anything that I am not insanely passionate about, because there's just not time in life for it, and it's so hard to make a film anyway. And the approach of trying to do something historically accurate, the great thing for me about it is that everybody knows what we're after. Everybody knows what we're after. We know that we're after this thing. So it aligns everybody. And we also, because we had the Viking historians working with us, like Neil Price and Johanna Katrin Friedrichsdotter, and we also had a lot of people who were working on the film, creating wardrobe and creating props and things, who were part of the living history and experimental archaeology community, who become Vikings on the weekend. So you have a lot of people who have like passion invested in figuring this stuff out. And so that makes the other people around them more passionate, And then all of a sudden, you have like core background playing enslaved people coming up to me with something that they read, And so everyone gets passionate about like the goal.
Now, talk about passion. Skarsgard is up next, and he's going to talk about everybody wanting to be accurate.
The plan was to be as accurate as possible, and just the amount of research that went into this was extraordinary. There would be conversations about, is this not the right century, but the right decade? Would this scene look like this? Well, this is more Eastern Sweden than Iceland this decade. Or what would this brooch look like? Would that be the right scene? Would that it was, as an actor, a dream to step into that outfit, because you felt that the attention to detail and the passion behind it. And it was imperative to not try to make it look cool. I think you often you can take a lot of creative freedom. I'm all for that, and make your characters look cool, even if at the time they might have looked very different. We chose not to do that. We chose to try to be as accurate as possible.
Now, in the vein of accuracy, Ethan Hawke is up next, and he talks about Skarsgard being pretty darn fit for this role.
Here's the thing about Alex is that, he's given Schwarzenegger a run for his money. He looks better than Conan. I don't know how the hell he did it, but to have somebody, he's an incredibly talented young man, and he comes from a family of great actors, and he has such a relaxed demeanor about performance. It's just wonderful to be around, and to see him dedicated to fulfilling this kind of vision. He's almost made a sculpture of his body, it's like Michelangelo or something out there. And I know how hard that is. I've had a few roles in my life where that was asked of me, and it's just incredible mental discipline. If you're supposed to look like an athlete, you have to live like an athlete. it's not a costume you can put on. And so that's very painful, and it takes incredible mental discipline and dedication. And he's done it with a smile on his face.
We're going to hear next from Anya Taylor Joy, and she's going to talk about working with the director and just the magnificent scenery of the locations they were shooting at.
It's been so wonderful to work with Robert again. I feel so lucky that my first experience in filmmaking was with him, because I didn't actually realize how much of the way that I comport myself on set, the way that I approach my work, how much of that actually comes from him. It's only in coming back onto set and seeing the way he works that I'm like, oh, I get it from you. That's where I get these little things from. Yeah, he's just the best. I don't think I've been very lucky with the people that I work with, but because Rob and I have such an understanding of each other, we just go to really interesting places very quickly. It's one of my favorite experiences. The authenticity of the project is something that's very key to the way that Rob works, and it makes everything so much easier because, you put on your costume and then you walk into the world and you're there. Like, there's no imagination necessarily needed in order to get yourself to this place. I am so happy to be working back in Northern Ireland. I did a movie here a couple of years ago and completely fell in love with the people and the scenery. I'm a big nature lover, so being on the side of a mountain overlooking incredible views and that being what you're looking at when someone's setting up the next shot, that's my happy place. So yeah, some truly extraordinary sights have been seen, but I'm not good at taking photographs, and I should be. I just want to drink it all in with my eyes. But no, we've been so lucky. It really makes it magical.
Now, that was her talking about the director. Up next, we have Willem Dafoe. Can we say anything that's not been said about this guy? What an extreme talent. I could go down the line. I could do several shows talking about him, but I'll just, keep this short. Just the man. And here he is talking about the director. And then after that, you're going to hear the director talking about him. And then we'll go back to him just talking a little bit more about the story. Willem Dafoe, ladies and gentlemen.
Robert kind of told me what he needed, and I think he tapped into certain things he'd seen as far as my energy and my sense of humor and my love to do physical things, and I think he really set me up to do those things. So preparation, I get sucked into his research. He says, listen, what do you want me to send you? And I'm like, bring it on, and I'll cherry pick. I'll see what's useful to me. And in fact, I got very sucked into it because this was a time in history and a culture that I didn't know a lot about. So while really maybe it wasn't necessary to go in great depth, it was a pleasure because I learned something, and I started to understand his attachment to it and his love for it. And you get sucked in. And then when you arrive and you see these sets that are made with such detail and such care, it helps with the pretending. If acting on some level is really pretending, everything's there. You enter that world and you fold into that world.
I love Willem. Willem's one of the greatest actors who's ever lived, in my humble opinion. But I think that, it should, I would submit that as a fact. And I'm lucky that he likes to work with me. And I think it was great because we'd already worked together on The Lighthouse, he knew what Jaron and I were up to.
It's a big, muscular film, much, much bigger than The Lighthouse. He still is approaching it with the same kind of detail and the same kind of care. And while I may sound Pollyanna, at this point, the producers are fantastic because they're supporting him in that approach. And a lot of that has to do with not just detail in the set, but these beautiful shots that are very designed, that play as one and have inside each shot has a rhythm and a story and a dynamic that's beautiful on its own. And he doesn't cover things. He doesn't protect himself and make the film in the editing room, although he's got a great editor in Louise Ford, who he's worked with 2 times before. You know, there's always challenges to editing, but he doesn't have all standard coverage. So there's a kind of concentration and a kind of engagement that's really all in when you are a performer in these shots. There's a precision and there's a demand on you to be really concentrated, and you're never outside of it because you have to concentrate so hard, be involved so hard, and be absorbed into the world to make the shot work. They built a town there on this cliff, basically. Very beautiful, this cliff was made for cinema, or cinema was made for this cliff, I don't know. But they built this very authentic, very beautiful town, and all the bells and whistles. I arrived and I realized what a large production this is, how muscular, how detailed, how strong it is. There were sheep, there were slaves, there were townspeople, there was lots going on. And given the fact that Robert has these beautiful designed shots, it's a lot to wrestle with. So, but he's up to the challenge. But I think it's going to be spectacular. Spectacular movie. A lot of my stuff is interior and fairly intimate, but some of the action sequences with the boats and with battles is going to be incredible.
In that it is. But up next, we're going to hear from Skarsgard and the director about the importance of watching this on the big screen.
I recommend watching The Northman on a very, very big screen because it's a Robert Eggers movie. And what Robert and Jaron, our DP, if you've seen The Witch or The Lighthouse, it's incredibly, they're both incredibly visual movies. And this is created by those two extraordinary filmmakers, but on a much, much larger scale, on a bigger scope. So I highly recommend watching this to be fully immersed in that world that Rob and Jaron created. It doesn't really do it justice on an iPad. I recommend watching it on a massive screen.
I'm making a movie for a broad audience in a way that I never have before. It really is intended to be something that like everyone can enjoy and eat their popcorn to. You know, there are set piece action sequences, which is something that I've never done before. But also because it's character driven, hopefully you walk away thinking about the movie and, you know, as much as you also were literally entertained. I must say that even I, in the age of COVID, have been able to watch things at home in a way that I've found more comfortable doing, you know, and as a filmmaker, I've tried so hard my professional life and before that, just as a movie lover, to always see stuff in the theaters. And I know it's hard. It's hard. But this is a movie you have to see in theaters. You know, Dune was something that I was not going to see like on HBO Max. And, you know, this is it's literally an epic. It's literally an epic. You know, we have these these Icelandic landscapes and these battle sequences, and you need to be transported. You need to be transported to the 10th century. You need to be transported to the Viking Age. And it's not only for the visuals, but the sound, you know, to really be in a movie theater and experience the waves crashing against the boat and the storm at sea. And, you know, without that, you cannot fully experience what this movie is.
And I completely agree with them. I'm not going to lie to you. Seeing it in the theater, it just amplifies everything up. The scenery, the sound, everything about this movie. If you want to see this movie, and if you can, see it in the theater. Because it's so moving. It's so visually stunning. He is such an incredible director, and what I like about him is he does such great things with natural lighting. It's not, flooded with light or whatever, but if there's shadows, he allows them to be shadows. It's not oversaturated, whatever. He is so skilled with natural lighting. And then besides that, Ireland, Iceland, the locations that they have, when you see it on the big screen, it is just breathtaking. They captured it so well. So if you can, see this in the theater because it is worth it. The sound, the visuals, impeccable. But mind you, this movie is not for everyone. If you shy away from violence and some gore, this will not be for you. But if you're able to look past that, this movie offers so much more than just that. It's not there to glamorize. It's just, this is what they did, and they did it. It's not violence for the sake of violence. Every act has a purpose, and they're moving forward. It's not glamorizing it at all. It's just, yes, brutal, harsh, and intense. Absolutely. But man, truly give this movie a shot. I think you'll love it. Now, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, any way to improve the show, feel free to let me know. cinemajudge@hotmail.com, or go to Instagram, The Cinema Judge, or Twitter, Cinema Judge, because I can't grow if I don't know. Please let me know what you would like to see or hear. That's what I'm here for. I just love movies, and I like sharing movies with you. Now, if you want to watch a TV version of this, I have 2 episodes of this. I have on a set version and just the one that you just heard, because the on a set version has so much great footage, and if you like that kind of thing, you'll want to watch that. So go to Bloomington, Minnesota's webpage. That's blm.mn/BTV-shows, and just type in Cinema Judge, and then you'll see on the set of the Northman, and also just the normal Northman episode. But wow, if you like the on the set stuff, check that one out. Now, from this point on, it's me thanking you, the listeners, and just telling you what I was listening to when I was making this episode. So from this point on, there'll be nothing more about the Northman. So it's just me talking to you and things of that nature. I want to thank everybody who took time out of your busy life to listen to the show this week. I know it's a crazy world out there, and you're very busy. And you taking time to listen to this show blows my mind. Every time I see a city, state, country, whatever show up, I get absolutely giddy. And I'm not just making that up. Every solitary time I'm like, yes, somebody listened. It makes me happy. I'm a simple man. Because so many of you tell me you listen when you're driving to work, driving back from work, sitting at home, doing the dishes, all kinds of things. And that's just so wonderful to hear, because that's what I like to do. Share movies. And if you're liking that, I'm liking that. And that's just so awesome. And I love hearing, like, hey, I listened to it in the early morning time or the middle of the night or whatever. I just totally, really enjoy hearing how you listen when you listen. So wherever, whenever, or whatever you're doing, this is for you. And it's so great to see so many different countries showing up. From the United States, United Kingdom, Iraq, Colombia, Germany, Philippines, France, Mexico, and so much more. From Minneapolis, Minnesota, St. Paul, Minnesota, Maple Lake, Minnesota, Charlottesville, North Carolina, Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, Illinois, Manchester, Pasadena, California, Littleton, Colorado, Eden Prairie, Minnesota, St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, South Hadley, Mass, Cottage Grove, Minnesota, Baghdad. Thank you so much. That is so cool. Markham, Illinois, Bogota, Frankfurt AM Hesse, Akeley, Minnesota, and Manila, just to name a few. You guys are fantastic. And this week's bourbon shout-out goes out to Olivia. Thanks so much for listening. And now it's time for the music section. Now, most of you know this. This originally is a TV version. And when I'm making a TV version, I could crank tunes as long as I want, as loud as I want, because I'm not doing this. Because when I'm doing this, obviously I can't have any music in the background. So often I set the mood, what kind of state of mind I need to be in, or what it might be what state of mind I am at that moment while I'm editing it. So this week I had a few things playing in the background. I had a little Air Supply going on. I was in a mood. What do? They have some great tunes. So I started off with little Air Supply. Then I moved on to America. And again, stellar tunes, just that perfect little groove you could just keep on riding. So look into America if you've never listened to America before. And then I figured, hey, let's just change it up a little bit. I put on the Beach Boys, because you know what, I'm eager for some nice weather. I'm thinking, hey, it'll help me get there. So I put on some Beach Boys. You can't go wrong with the Beach Boys. It puts you in your happy place. You know, because this movie was a little darker and all these kind of things. So I try to combat that or do a little night and day from the tone of the thing I'm doing to what I'm listening to. So it just kind of keeps me a little laser focused. So the Beach Boys, what a fine way to do it. So that is it. My glass awaits. I'm thirsty. So cheers to you and to the movies. So until next time, be well, be good, and I'm gone. I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening to The Cinema Judge.